So this video is going to be for the later style tilt and dump cylinders for 6/4/8, and this will be on your 60/18s and 70/20s. These are held on with the gland nut. So we got videos we did on lift cylinders, the power steering cylinders, the mid-lift cylinders on the tractors, and the 3.H cylinders. So be sure to watch those. We'll put a snippet in the back of each video explaining what tools we have a little bit more, but those will be at the end along with a link into the description for all the tools and whatnot. So the first thing you want to do is you don't want to damage these cylinders when you clamp them in the vise. These ones are sandblasted because they're going on a restoration. But the point of not damaging them is you don't want to squeeze a cylinder, dent it, distort it in any way, and it does happen, and it happens frequently. People over tighten the heck out of these, and then it'll either destroy your cylinder, wear your seals out twice as fast or faster, or it just won't work if you go too much, and we've seen that too. So you need to be in these vices pretty tight, or whatever you're using to clamp it, but you don't want to over tighten it. So down here, this vice is set up for clamping around things. Essentially pipe is what it's kind of, I think, essentially designed for, but we'll do that as a precaution. It gives that something to bounce up against and not spin anymore. And then the vise will just secure this. If you want to use the correct tool for the job, there's a couple of different options here. These spanner wrenches work great. If you're in an absolute emergency jam, you can put a pipe wrench on here, but it beats the hell out of here. It beats the hell out of your cylinder. Not the way to do it. Some guys get away with whacking these with punches and getting them on and off. But buy spanner wrenches or something similar that's made for the job. These are Williams USA. Nice set. And they're worth having. Depending on what you're working on, sometimes these are on here with a ton of force. Other times they're reasonable. It just depends on what you're working on. You're getting into some bigger, heavy equipment, and you literally got to put 5-6 inch pipes on these to get them to come off. So, not horrible. Need a little assistance with a hammer. Make sure you got a drain pan to catch the residual oil. You want to get all the oil out ahead of time. Take your lines off here and move this rod in and out. That'll pump the oil out of these fittings. And then you're always going to have some left in here. So just be aware to catch it. And these gland nuts turn hard because there's a little plug of nylon in the threads, and that kind of stops them from backing out. So they go in and off hard by design. They're fine thread. So this is the bigger cylinder on the loaders that does the center bucket tilt and dumping. So it's a little bigger than the dual arm cylinders. This should come out easy. Sometimes they don't, but this one came out pretty decently. Again, you want to protect things. We're going to get this nut off the end. I'm just going to wrap this end here. So this one doesn't have a lock nut, which is kind of surprising, I guess. A lot of them do. A lot of hydraulic cylinders either have a jam nut, lock nut, like a metal lock nut or a nylock. Or I've seen some double nutted too. These are usually on pretty good. Impact makes life a lot easier. And a good size impact usually is what it takes. You definitely don't want these packings loosening up on you. So you're going to want to pay attention to the order, how things come apart as always. So once it come off one piece, let it. Partially. So these all were assembled this way on this tractor, which I think they were rebuilt once upon a time. But the way the book's showing is that this O-ring should be on this side. This needs to be flipped 180 with the recess out. This is the way the book's showing. Alright, so kind of keep them in the order as things come apart. That way when you go together you can do it. This is the only thing I'm going to question on this is I believe this should go actually up against here. I don't know if it ultimately matters, but there's got to be a reason the book has it going one way and why that O-ring's there. And I think it's to seal off towards the threads. These little mini pry bars I get from Mayhew or Lyle. Both of them are great. I think these ones might be the Lyle one, and I've got a Mayhew one over here. They each come in 2 packs. different angles and different sizes. That's why I got both of them. They both work well. So there's never season here, and there was quite a bit of never season in the gland nuts. So these, and I don't like putting never season in the hydraulics for a couple of reasons. It builds up like this for one thing. The other thing is, it is metal, it is aluminum. Yeah, aluminum's soft, but you really don't want that running through your hydraulic system if you can help it. And the threads, usually I coat them with oil or something, and I feel that works plenty good as long as you put enough. But this is just a lot of buildup and never sees. And how much of that actually ran through your system is my question. Okay, so you want to inspect this, make sure there's no burrs here as you pull this off. Even though we're putting new seals on, we don't need to make things more difficult. As long as this is smooth, the new one should go on pretty easily. And then this is just like all our other videos with this style. It'll get cleaned off and disassembled. Let's take this rod out of here. Okay, so this is a backup ring. Essentially seals up your threads here. And anything that gets past the rest of the seals and your threads, this kind of backs it up. This has got some corrosion in here, some garbage in here. Definitely don't like to see that. That we're going to clean up with a wire brush. There's that nylon plug I was telling you about that's in the threads that makes them thread hard. That's so they don't back out by themselves and they stay. When the threads expand, they expand into this nylon, and it keeps everything locked, and nylon expands into the threads in the cylinder. So we're going to have, again, our wiper seal here. You want to get behind these as far as you can before you start prying them out, and then go with them. And then on the bottom of this one, we've got our U-cup. Again, you want to get behind it if you can instead of into the center of it, because it will rip and tear. Even though we're replacing them, it makes it a lot easier if you can get it out in one piece. These are a little more stiffer of a U-cup than the other cylinders, but it comes right out. Alright, and that's that. There's not a lot to them. These are kind of, it's a nice simple design that work well. And now we're going to take these over to our parts washers and we'll be back. Alright, so we got everything back from the parts washer. Open up our seal kit. These are nice high quality seal kits we put together for you guys. I recommend putting new nuts on here. And this is what was on there. We're going to go with the Nylock. It looks like somebody might have used some Loctite on here, but we're going to go with the Nylock, and still might choose to put a little Loctite on here, but when I pulled this off, it almost felt more like RTV. Honestly, it was soft, and it came out in big rings. So we're going to, even though we just got back from the parts washer, always clean these grooves out. O-ring spoon or screwdriver. Fold your towel over a couple times, go a few directions. There's always going to be something in there left that you didn't get. Make sure whenever you're using the brake clean that it's always dried up, because it will affect these seals and O-rings, and you don't want that. So we're going to start with the U-cup. We're going to use our little U-cup installers. Again, you want to coat this up. Makes it a little tougher to hold on to with the tool, but just like everything, I have a coating on it before it goes in. It goes in easier, and it just gives it some lube in there if there is any movement and stuff. I mean, theoretically, the oil shouldn't get past this, so whatever movement you're going to have is going to be dry if it's not coated. These U-cup installers are just the way to do it. You can fight this thing in here, and I'm not going to tell you it can't be done, because it definitely can, but these U-cup installers make this job much easier instead of fighting that in by hand and chance of damaging it and being frustrated. We'll get that set in there, and as you do this, you're going to want to guide this so it wraps up on itself evenly, and it's tough, especially if you got oil on your hands and stuff, but trust me, these things are way worth the effort and the small expense. And then you want to end up like that. That way you can install it nice and even level. And you set it in there. Make sure you're in the groove you want. And then kind of guide it back into the groove as you're opening this up. Probably can't see in there real well, and you're gonna have to put some in at the end by hand most of the time, and then just pull that out. Sometimes they'll stay in like that and you just push it in. Other times you got to walk it in with your tool, but either way. And then put good pressure on here and make sure it's seated in that groove. I'm going to do the same thing with the rod wiper. I'm going to lube up this groove it sits in and keep the seal dry right now because these are a little tougher to put in sometimes. And then we'll lube it all up as we go for final assembly. Same thing, you want to get this on there and then you want to guide it as you're working your tool back into position. I know you can't see because my hand's in the way, but if I take my hand out, it's not going to be where I want it to be. They make different size U-cup installers for different size seals. Usually they sell them in sets as well. So most times you get a set of 3 or 4. It's going to cover most of the sizes until you get some real big machinery. That looks like that. This is the direction I want it facing because this is how I want it to end up facing me. And then this is concave and cut at an angle. So is a seal. So that seal is going to sit in there and get it in at that angle a little bit. And then as you open this up, it'll work its way in. And then now that you got it past there, use these outer ones a little bit to set it. And then I like to go in from the bottom because you're going from the top, sometimes it pushes. And then sometimes it will pop out too, but if you go in from the bottom here, you can kind of guide it with both fingers right into that channel. And there it is. And then now you put some lube on this inside. So when we're assembling it, it's got plenty. And then the last part of this one is this backup ring that goes around the threads. Again, get some lube on here. I cleaned up the corrosion that was in there, so it's all nice and clean in there. And then that means the O-ring did its job because past the O-ring is clean. Nothing got past it. When you do these, I like to set them in the groove halfway, and then just take an O-ring spoon, a clean one, clean O-ring spoon, and protect the O-ring on this side with the threads with the spoon. That way you're not walking it all the way over the threads with the whole entire O-ring. You only do part of it. You just take this and then walk it over the spoon instead of the threads, and then just seat it by hand. And then this piece is all set for assembly. Again, we're going to take this shaft. I'm going to move it up. I want to make sure this edge here is got no burrs on it. If you need to take a little file or sandpaper, clean it up. And then, again, this is lubed up inside here. And this goes on like this. You want to make sure it's even. And you want to put gentle pressure on it. And either rock it a little bit. Or sometimes if you spin them, they'll walk on too. Alright, the first one just went. And the second one is now sitting on there on the U-cup. And again, even pressure. Sometimes if you give it a little tap, it'll go. These are new seals, so they're going to be tight. Again, whatever you use, make sure it's clean. And as you're doing this, pull down on this. So whatever little bit you're knocking, you gain, you don't lose. So keep pressure constantly on there. Alright, that's going to fight. I'm going to try a different method. Again, make sure it's clean. I'm going to stick this on here. And I'm just going to gently tap the top. Once they go, they go. Just want to kind of double check what you can see, make sure no chunks of metal, no chunks of rubber came out. That means the seal's alright. If it didn't, should be good. Just put this up 3/4 of the way or so. And remember, this was kind of set up backwards according to the book. We're going to set it up the way the book reads. So now we're going to assemble this side. I'm going to put a little bit of lube on here. This piece goes on like this. And then we're going to have our piston cup. And this I like to lube up a little bit too. So even though we cleaned this up, I'm going to do one final clean of this groove where this piston cup is sitting. You can see there's a little bit of stuff still in there. Some of that's the lube on there, but I just want to make sure she's clean. And then this piston cup goes on like this. That's going to sit in there. So again, this is where the difference of how it was assembled to how we're putting it back together according to the pictures in the book. I think either way will probably work, but this is what we're going to do. It came apart like this, but we're going to put this O-ring lubed up in this groove. And even though when you put the O-ring on, it wants to fight going this way, where if you did this way, it would push it into the groove. This way here, I think we're sealing off the threads a little bit. And then we'll just work the O-ring back over the threads gently. And this way here, it's probably less damage because the O-ring can expand, where if it was stuck in there, it may keep it in there, but the O-ring's got nowhere to expand, so you're going to wear more on it. And then just simply reseat that O-ring in there. If you got to run the back of your tool on there, do that, that's fine. We got the O-ring in there. We got this other piston cup. We'll load this up a bit. Now, assembling this stuff too, you can stick these in hot water. There's really no need in this style cylinder. Some of the older ones where you got the O-rings and backup rings and stuff to slide over, you can do that, or stick them out in the sun. This O-ring back here we did on these glands. If you wanted to, you could put it in some hot water. It would have slid over there a little bit easier, but for what we're doing, it works fine. Just a tip. We're going to send these into the deep chest freezer before we assemble this cylinder. And then again, this is going to go back. We're going to put it back the same way it was. You can see the pattern of the piston cups. That thing goes on here. And then we're going to have our new nut. I'm just going to clean these threads out a little bit with the nylon brush. It's got some lube in there, and we'll just get that out of there. And then be careful. You don't want to get your seals any very clean, but just going to clean those threads up. Get the lube out of the threads right now. And then what we're going to do, we're going to use a new grade 8 nylock nut. And I'm just going to put a dab of Loctite in there as backup. But I'm going to just put a little bit right in here. That's it. And then this is going to set back in the vise for tightening. Stick it in the vise like that. You want to go pretty tight with these. They need to stay on there under pressure and under back and forth cycles. Make sure everything feels like it's set and centered. You don't want to go over tighten because you'll squish the hell out of these and make them more expand out here in the front side too narrow, but you want to get a good torque on them. And then again at this point, set this up in the deep freeze is what I suggest, and then stick your cylinder bore, and you can either put it in the oven for a little while or out in the sun, whatever you can do to get some heat into it, and it'll help assembly these too. You don't want to get obviously this too hot and this too cold, but your deep freezer will be fine for this for a couple hours probably, just to get it down to temperature. And by the time you take it out of the oven and bring it around, it's going to cool down enough where you're not going to damage the seals. Don't forget, hydraulic fluid runs between 120 to 200 degrees. Depending on what you're doing and workload and cooling and whatnot, and it can see higher temperatures than that. So these are rated for high temperatures, but you don't want to get them melted on your cylinder, but you don't want this shrunk down either. So if you can get that warm and these cold with enough lube and patience, you'll get them. Okay, this just came out of the deep freezer. This came out of the hot ultrasonic heater cleaner. Lube all over these threads. It's gonna get greasy and melt down because it's hot. Got up to about 180 degrees, I believe. Lube on the deep freeze size is going to gel up. Sometimes you just walk them on with some pressure and thread them back and forth. There we go. There we go. Just want to work them back a little bit just to get your lube spread out. Okay, this both have gotten equalized room temperature. Got it in the vise, wrapped up. using this as a little bit of a stop. Again, you want to get these set in here with the O-ring, and then after that, that's when you start tightening them for real. You notice now that they got equalized temperature, that piece of nylon is gripping the threads, so this is going a little harder. Alright, so you want to make sure that O-ring looks like it's going to set in there nicely. It's not bulged or bumped out anywhere. Usually it's never an issue, but once in a great while it will be. Again, you want to make sure these are really snug. Get them good and tight. It's going to bottom out. I like to give them a whack with a hammer or put a pipe on here just to make sure they go. It lasts a little turn or so. Everyone's going to be a little different, but this cylinder is going to go off to paint, and it'll be good. We'll talk about why you should rebuild these when you know you need to, and when maybe you should as preventative. So the key here is anywhere this rod that goes into this cylinder through these seals, and then obviously you've got this sealing on the outside, but this is going through multiple seals inside here. You can't have any nicks, any chips, any flaked chrome off of here. If you do, it's either got to get repaired or replaced, because one little flake or nick in here is going to rip these rubber seals inside here apart, and you're going to have leaking cylinders. So if somebody parks something and these loader arms are stuck all the way up and it stays there for years, the rust and the leather will eventually pit this and it destroys it. So if you're parking something for a long time, always have your cylinders retracted. Same thing with log splitters, anything like that. Your 3-point hitches, always retract your cylinders, because this comes all the way up to here and it protects it once it's sitting inside full of oil. If your loader struggles to lift something, if you were talking about boom arms, if you feel like one is lifting either stronger or faster than the other, you can have bad seals inside the cylinders. If it's not lifting at all, you can have some extreme seal damage and it's bypassing internally. If you leave your bucket up and it settles, or anything your hydraulics are on, doesn't have to be a bucket, if it settles by gravity, or if you've got a load in it and it settles, then chances are your seals need replacing. The bucket should stay wherever you have it. I'm just using a bucket as an example. Whatever hydraulic tool you're using should stay where you leave it until you release the pressure with the valve. So if you're having anything like that, I would replace the seals, repack these. It could also be an internal valving issue, but the cheapest and easiest way to go, and at least know you've got good cylinders, is just go ahead and replace the seals and repack them. And then if you're having trouble lifting things after you rebuilt your cylinders, repacked them, at that point, again, it could be a valving issue or a pump issue. These do wear out over hours of use. They wear out over time. If they get dry, then age will wear them out. I mean, they sit in oil, they'll wear out too, but it's much faster if these are dry and they're used occasionally and they go inside dry cylinders. So it's not a bad practice just to rebuild these. Hour-wise, it just depends on your environment, how hot your oil is getting, how well you're taking care of things. If you're not having any leakage, 500 hours is not a bad time to just rebuild these every 500 hours. We've got guys that do them every 250 because they don't want to deal with them when they start leaking. And there's ones that come in here that have been original, that have 1,000 hours on them and just start to leak. So that's up to you. The kits are fairly inexpensive. It's a fairly easy job. We offer rebuilding services, so you can send your cylinders to us, or we sell the kits at caseingersolltractors.com, and you can buy the loader seal kits for the late models, for the early models, for the mid lift, for the 3-point hitch, as well as your mid lift and power steering. And then obviously the other thing is, I guess, don't want to pass obvious, is if you've got oil leaking out of here when you're using your machine, or if you got oil leaking out of here when you're using your machine, then these need rebuilding. Because by the time we get to this point, you're already past multiple seals, and you need a rebuilding for sure. This seal up here is really only to keep stuff from going into the cylinder. This seal up here is not to keep things out, and a lot of people think, oh, you only need to replace one seal. Not true. This seal is to keep stuff from going in. It does have a bottom lip that is more of a triple backup, but once it gets to that point, the seals inside are already shot. You do the lift cylinders for your buckets and your late cylinders, the late model 648s, and your 6018s and your 7020 Case Ingersoll loaders. These are set up very similar if you've seen our power steering video for the loaders. and the section also for the dump cylinders. These are going to be set up similar, but we'll show you. And there's some use of anti-seize on here. You can do that if you want, but the problem is you use too much and it gets in the hydraulic system, and anti-seize is got little pieces of aluminum in them, and we don't need aluminum flying around under thousands of psi. So that's up to you. If you put a little bit up in this top groove where hopefully it'll never get in there, I get it. But we coat these with lube, either grease, oil, Vaseline, and I feel that's enough. So you can see the anti-seize on here. All those little chunks of silver. I'm hoping it's anti-seize. Let's put it that way. As if that's part of your hydraulic pumper system, things are not good. This tape was on here because we were trying to protect it when we were sandblasting. You don't want to damage these rods. These rods have to be absolutely smooth. And getting into that, I have to do this with an impact, but usually these are on pretty tight. Once you're starting to get into bigger equipment, they're on really tight, but the impact makes the job easier. These are the lift arms again, so these ones are 15/16, and the dump bucket one was 1 1/8 inches. These are the same size, basically very similar kit as to the power steering for the late models. And then you want to always inspect the bore. You want to shine a flashlight down in here. Obviously you're not going to be camera, but you want to feel as much as you can, make sure there's no ridges, no scratches. And we're going to take these all right now down to the parts washer, and we'll be back. So with some of our kits, you'll notice there's going to be extra parts. That's because they fit multiple cylinders, multiple years, different setups, and it's easier to just give you a few extra parts than to stock 20 different kits that fit similar cylinders. So the best thing to do is obviously match up what you took out. Replace what's in your kit. As long as it looks like nothing's missing, then just put back in what was in there. And if you got extra parts, set them aside. You may need them someday for something else. You install this the way you want the seal to end up facing you. Normally I try to put pressure on from underneath so the seal doesn't go in anymore, and then work it in. The O-rings will pop out occasionally like that. It's okay, they'll go back in. Get that seal in there as much as you can within reason, and then press it down here so your O-ring doesn't get pinched, and you can work the O-ring back in. Push it down again. Try not to damage anything, but these O-rings actually, the O-ring itself doesn't do any sealing on these setups. It actually works as pressure to keep these seals expanded out towards the housing and in towards the rod to create a better seal. So it's more of an expansion. The O-ring works as an expansion and pressure, almost like a spring. And then your sealing is done on this lip here. Once it's in there like that, seat it really good with your thumb or your fingers. Some years you're going to have an O-ring underneath here. There may be another U-cup in here somewhere, but I just saw this is what this one's got. Clean this up here. Took some roll-lock disc, but you can take some sandpaper, emery cloth, whatever you got. You want this edge to be smooth. It's going to make the insertion much easier. And then coat this whole rod. Make sure this is all coated in here nice. Sometimes they go 1, 2, 3. Sometimes they don't. So this one already fell on there real nice. And then this U-cup's usually the part that's a little bit harder. Sometimes you're just a little bit of force and you walk them back and forth. That one went alright. You just make sure you got no chunks of rubber, that it didn't cut anything. And that one's good. We're going to try the nylox, but on this situation, they're going to stick out past the bottom of this. And it's tight clearance on the bottom, and I don't want to take a chance. It would probably be okay. By the time you snug it up, there'd be just a tiny bit of that nylox sticking out past it. But I don't want to take a chance, so we're going to use a regular nut and some Loctite and sock them up. And it'll probably be fine, absolutely fine, because that's obviously what they did here. But this will work out fine. They really need to be pretty darn tight, but you don't want to go too much where you damage these piston cups and O-rings. That's pretty tight. I'm going to say that's where we want to be. Each one's going to be a little different, so you can't completely judge by what's sticking out. But so we're going to stick this in the deep freeze. The cylinder is getting warmed up in our ultrasonic heater cleaner, and we'll be back for assembly. So this came out of the sonic cleaner heater washer. Make sure we get some up on the cylinder, top and bottom, and then we're going to take this, and this is out of the deep freeze. It's cold, you can see it. And now we're going to try to walk this in here. Sometimes they go 1, 2, 3. Other times you're going to have to really work them. Got to kind of walk them in. Put pressure on them, spin them. Kind of a back and forth motion. May have to take it on the ground and give it a little tap. You really shouldn't go too hard, but it shouldn't go easy either. Okay, now it's past the threads into the bore. A little bit easier now. But just get this started so it guides your rods in center. I just like to get that lube around there and coated. The later style cylinders. We're going to have videos on the earlier style. We've got videos on the power steering, the 3-point hitches, and the mid-lift as well. You can get your kits at Ingersolltractors.com. We appreciate you guys watching. Be sure to subscribe. Remember, if man built it, man can fix it. And be sure to check out our other videos. Thank you.